to record. So Elizabeth, if you are back,
I'm back.
do you want to do the preliminary slide that you always do?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. We
So
took we froze you in kryptonite, but I guess you unfroze you.
Yep. I had internet issues. The joys.
Yeah.
But just a couple housekeeping things as we kick things off. This is our big event is coming up. It's our annual conference, Taylor Business Group conference that we do every year by our members for our members. It is in the beautiful Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood, Florida, August 24th through the 26th. Gradient MSP is going to be there. It's going to be a great time. If you haven't registered, get registered. If you're new to TBG, reach out to us or go to taylorbusinessgroup.com big and learn more. It's going to be awesome. I'm super excited about it. And next slide, we have a service and security workshop following Big in October 11th, 12th, and 13th. It's going to be at the Threat Locker's office. You will hear from both Huntress and Threat Locker. And we'll do 2 days of service leader content, and 1 day of security content. It's going to be a great event. So check us out there at taylorbusinessgroup.com. You'll see MSP training and classroom training to learn more. And without further ado, I will pass it to Andrew.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. All right. Let's make sure that I remember how to share out a screen here. First things first, hey? There we go. Okay. So obviously, I just want to take a minute, thank everyone for being here, taking a little bit of time to listen to me. So this presentation today is pretty well geared towards any MSP that is looking to grow their business. If you have intent on finding new customers in the next 6 months, 3 months, year, you name it, this is a great place to start. Now, if you've already got a process, that's excellent. There's definitely going to be some tips and tricks and tidbits for you to take away to continue to refine things a little bit. But really right now, we want to get a start on where do we kick things off? If you are a newer shop and you've hired a couple techs and you're looking to grow your business and maybe even hire your first sales staff, how do we do that? What's our next step? So before we do that, a little bit about myself. So obviously, Andrew McKeag, I'm the director of sales over here at Gradient MSP. You can call me a liar because I probably don't look like it, but I have 20 plus years of sales experience, multiple industries, a lot of them in technology, IT, software, SaaS, that sort of thing. Built multiple.
Andrew, that's probably good because you started at the age of 12, right?
Oh, of course. That's up in Canada. We start work early. There's not much else to do. So why not?
One other thing I wanted to bring up that I forgot in the beginning, if you can't see the chat or you can't see the Q&A buttons, just raise your hand and I'll allow your mic if you want to ask questions. So we'll want to make sure we get your questions answered. So just raise your hand.
Absolutely. This is meant to be as interactive as possible. So as much as I do love the sound of my own voice, please interrupt me as often as you can. I'm happy to handle questions as they come up. So yeah, I mean, I've worked through multiple industries, building sales teams and sales processes across multiple organizations, obviously for Gradient MSP as well at this point. And one of the things that I love personally about sales is that I've always said it's equal parts art, form, and science. You know, you can teach anyone sales, whether you're the biggest introvert or you are the life of the party. But the reality is there's also a science to it, right? There are numbers that are easy to follow. And if you know what you're doing and you know what you're tracking and you're tracking things appropriately, you can pretty well plug anyone into a process and have a predictable result from that. So you might be thinking to yourself, if we are starting to grow our business, we're looking to implement some sales process, maybe even bring on a sales staff, where do you start? And the thing that I'm going to urge absolutely everyone to do is to start with yourself. Plain and simple, salespeople are expensive. They're candidly a little entitled. They want big commissions. They want to have leads fed to them. And they want a lot of this set up for them, right? And the reality of your business is that no one is ever going to do as good a job of selling your business as yourself. If you don't have a process that's proven out and something that you've done and put in by yourself and shown that you can prove results out, it's going to be very, very difficult to have expectations set appropriately for a sales staff. I've seen way too many organizations that want to grow their business. They want to start putting a growth plan in place, and they make the mistake of hiring a VP of sales, or they hire a salesperson first, and that is where they start. And unfortunately, a lot of times they don't know what expectations to put out there, and they don't have a process in place, and they expect that person to build their process for them. Inevitably, a lot of times what happens is they don't see the results that they feel that they're paying for. They end up churning out staff, and you go 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the track, and you are right back where you started and not having the growth that you expected. So start with yourself. Sales may not be your expertise. It may not even be something that you have ever done. But the reality of sales is that it isn't any tricks. There's nothing, no secret sauce to this. There's processes that you can put in place, but it is a conversation, and it is understanding that if there is a problem within that business, within your prospect's business or organization, and you have a legitimate fix for that, and that is what the service that you offer is, then you can actually lead that conversation, and you can be your first salesperson and start to prove out that process. So how do we start to do this? How do we find our process, and what are the steps that we want to take? So this is a little bit of an agenda for today. Why do I need a sales process, right? Isn't it just having a conversation? Why does there have to be steps in place? Right? An ideal customer profile. Obviously, there are a large number of businesses out there on the market. How do we know where we want to find prospects? Where do we find those prospects? How do we reach them? Your actual sales pipeline, and some of the things that you're going to want to measure, and obviously where you can start to make tweaks within that process. So let's start with, why do I need a sales process? Well, again, we've talked about, if you are at the stage where you want to grow your business and your plan for the next 12 months is significant or even minor growth, that's a great time to do it, because the reality of a sales process is it's going to give you a predictable growth model. Once you have your process a little bit ironed out, you are going to be able to see and predict out how many customers can you bring on in a given time, what are the resources required to do that, and that gives you a ton of opportunity, because now you can start to plan out your resources, right? How many technicians are you going to need? What kind of hiring path are we going to look for? Are we going to be bringing on and growing to the point where we need to start to potentially look at other staff within our business and maybe expanding that out a little bit? And just having that predictable growth model allows you to do that. The other one that I find most important, and unfortunately a lot of MSPs are going to be guilty of this, is that you don't have to settle for a bad customer just because they have a bank account, right? You might have customers that are an absolute drain on you, your staff. They're rude, they're not a great fit for you, but you haven't gotten rid of those customers. There's ways that you can kind of politely fire customers, and it makes an absolute world of difference for morale around the office, and ultimately for the business in general. And you don't have to settle for those customers if you know that you can replace them, right? And this is another really important piece, is that sales might not always feel intuitive to everyone, but I promise you, anyone can learn. I've worked in organizations where we've brought on people who, you look at them and you think, there's no way that this person could be a salesperson. They can't hold a conversation with me. And then after a little bit of time and a little bit of practice, they end up being some of your top performers. And again, it's not always something that everyone has right off the bat, but if you put a little bit of time and effort behind it, I absolutely promise you, anyone can pick this up and start to develop this process and start to grow their business. So when do I need to have a sales process? What time in my business do I want to implement a sales process? Well, the reality of it is yesterday. If you are at a point in your business where you want to grow, or you want to start to find your next new customer, you are ready to implement the sales process. It's never too early in a business to understand, where do we find new prospects? Who are those prospects? How do we find out if they're a good fit for our business or not? You do not need to hire a salesperson, and you do not need to wait for that to build a sales process. An important takeaway, I think, for everyone today is that your first salesperson should fit into your sales process, not the other way around, right? And we are going to get into a little bit of, how do I hire a salesperson? What do I look for? All of those fun things. But your sales process is something that should be proven out by your internal staff, by yourself, ideally, before you start to grow and add a growth mechanism to your business and a growth team. So let's start to dive into some of the nitty-gritty of this. And the first place that I want to start is what's called an ideal customer profile. And some of you may have heard of this. Some of you, this might be something new. But the reason that you want to start with an ideal customer profile, and this is a great exercise for anyone that is a business owner to go through. The purpose of that is that, again, just because someone has a pulse and a bank account does not mean they're a good fit for your business. Okay? We all want to look at where can we find new customers. And as an MSP, effectively, anyone that has IT services, a computer, laptops, servers, could be a fit as a customer for you. But that's casting an extremely wide net. And when you cast too wide a net, when you talk about trying to find prospects or new customers, you end up wasting a lot of cycles prospecting people who are just not going to be a good fit for you or for your services. Right? So when you start to build this, ideally, you're probably going to have anywhere from 3 to 5 different profiles. Some people put a fun name on them. You don't have to, but again, depending on the exercise you're going through, it might be a good place to start. But you're going to have a couple different types of businesses that really do fit well with you, with your customers, and with the types of services that you offer. Now, we're going to go through a bit of an example of what this is going to look like. But some of the things that you want to start to look at is what types of verticals do we work with? How big are these businesses? Do they have in-house IT, or is it something that they've always outsourced? A really important one, what's the financial status of that business? And there are some signals that you can look for. You know, if you do a quick Google or if you look on their LinkedIn, are they hiring? Are they growing? Are they opening new offices? You can use something like crunchbase.com. If you haven't come across that, it's a really handy website that you can just do a quick search for different companies. And you can actually potentially get a glimpse into their financials. If they're funded at all, if they're doing new rounds of funding, if they've recently done that, you'll get a quick glimpse into, are these businesses at a stage where they're expected to grow? And that's a really good sign, because typically that means that that business is in a really healthy place and they're going to have the budget for your business. Another one that's not always something people think of, but is a really important exercise when we're talking about your ideal customer profile, are the values of that business. Right? You're typically going to look at your customers internally and you're going to have a few favorites. And the reason for that is they often have very similar values. And you might think, how do we uncover that? How do you know what the values of a business are? Is it their mission statement, anything like that? No, you don't want to necessarily go by their mission statement, because anyone can just make that up and throw it on their website, right? Or their company values. But if you get to a point where you're having meetings with businesses, you're going into their office, first or second meeting, stuff like that, my recommendation, go a little bit early, be there 5 minutes early, sit in their lobby or in their waiting room, and you'll get a feel. Does their office have a bit of a buzz to it? Are people scrambling, seem overworked, stressed? Or do they seem like they're collaborative, responsible, respectful, things like that? That's something that you can get an insight to just by being in their office and getting a bit of a feel for how those businesses function. Another really important, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead,
I
Dennis.
think another place you can do that is look at some of the social posts that their members, that the employees are looking at.
Yep.
And understand on LinkedIn what they're supporting, what they're supportive of, and what they're supporting.
Absolutely. Even looking at things like reviews. And I personally, it's not everyone's favorite, but I really enjoy Google reviews because you can't tamper with those. You can't just go in and delete bad ones. And just as important as seeing how people treat their good customers is seeing how people treat their bad experience. Is right. If they've got customers who weren't happy, things like that, did they respond to it? Right. Was that response helpful and collaborative? Things like that. Do you have anything to add there, Dennis?
No, I think that's great.
Okay. All right. The other one that I find is really important and something that, is worth thinking about is obviously geography, right? You may be at a size where you want to remain local, but you may be starting to scale up and potentially hire someone who's not really within your immediate geo. Can you support customers within a certain distance? Can you open up and spread that region that you're able to service within a certain region? Just as important, though, as the good things that you want to look for are red flags, right? And a couple red flags, if you're starting to look from an MSP perspective, is, are they churning out MSPs or IT staff? Are they coming to you through maybe a marketing channel or an internal request and saying, hey, we're looking for a new MSP? Well, how many have they had in the last year or 2 years, right? Are they going through them at a huge rate? As you're meeting with people or even just talking to, the decision makers on the phone, do they have a bit of a know-it-all attitude, or do they actually want to see you as a trusted advisor, right? And starting to take your advice and building that kind of cornerstone of their business with your relationship. Another one, and this is something that we're going to get into a little bit more, but obviously everyone needs to keep this in mind, is budget, right? You may have 2 or 3 meetings with these people. You may absolutely love them, get along with them, be your best friend. But, the reality is, in the immortal words of Tina Turner, what's love got to do with it, right? You don't want to necessarily bring someone on if they don't have the budget for your services. You're going to end up chasing people to pay their invoices. You and your staff are not volunteers. It is absolutely okay for you to walk away at any point in that sales process if the prospect doesn't meet some of these things, right? There is nothing wrong with you saying, you know what, I don't think that we're going to be a good fit, and I don't think that we're going to be able to service your business in the way that it's necessary. There's likely going to be another business out there that is a better fit for you. And you can make it about yourself instead of them to make it a bit of an amicable break. But you don't want to get too far down there and, again, end up bringing on one of those customers that's a little bit toxic to you and to your staff, because those are the people that are ultimately going to keep your doors open and pay your bills. So I've crafted up a little bit of an example of a ideal customer profile here for you. And this is a great example for you to use in terms of how do we want to structure this, right? You want to have the criteria that you're looking for, but just as important, you want to know, why are you looking for those criteria, right? And again, this is about building out that process so that if you bring someone on, they can pick this up, they can have a quick read through this and understand exactly who they should be looking for. So as we look at this, an example, someone who is 25 to 75 employees, they're a large enough business to require your services, but they're not beyond your ability to service them. You don't want to go out and have your 4th or 5th customer be a massive 500-person, potentially multi-office business that you're going to fall on your face trying to service. Grow and scale yourself within your ability to service those businesses. The other stuff is, industries. Are there verticals that you already service? And this is a great time to look internal. Look at your existing customers and start to understand what really makes them work well for you, right? Maybe you work well with dental offices or manufacturing firms, law offices. If there are specific types of software that these businesses use that you're already familiar with, that's a great opportunity for you to already have a leg up on any other service offering out there. And you can sit there, have these meetings, and speak the same language as them. It immediately instills confidence. They feel like you know their business and they're going to be able to trust you with their IT services. Do they have an internal IT staff in place? If they do, that may be their entire budget for IT locked up in an internal staff. You don't want to put someone to a decision of having to let go of an internal staff to be able to afford your services. That might not be the case for every single ideal profile that you've created. Those ICPs that you create, maybe you have some that are specifically targeted to co-manage, right? But again, this is stuff that's worth taking into consideration because it does play into their ultimate ability to make a decision to sign a contract with you or to walk away, right? We've talked about values. Are their staff, someone that reflects the same values as your teams and your business is an extremely important one. And again, of course, that financial status and the budget. Are they a profitable business? Everyone can look and see, the profitable businesses that are out there are your best long-term customers. They're continually growing. They're likely signing on for project work. They're probably opening up new offices, which unlocks more potential revenue for you. If they are struggling, they're always going to be struggling to pay you. And unfortunately, the reality of sometimes offering IT services is when everything's going really well, it means that you're not front and center all the time, right? So when they start to look and they're struggling, they're not making enough money, and they maybe are barely breaking even, and they start to look at places where they can cut costs. If you aren't front and center all day, every day, it's very easy for them to say, you know what, maybe we look at doing this internally and we could potentially do this for half the cost, whatever rationalization they make. If that money isn't always flowing in, it's always going to be a bit of a struggle to keep them on board. All right. So you've gone through, created a few profiles. You understand what type of customers are going to be a fit for you. So now we need to get to a point of finding some prospects. How do we find these businesses, right? Now that you're armed with these ideal customer profiles, where are you going to go ahead and start to track these businesses down? So I will say this time and again, there's a lot of stuff that happens in sales that you may not be a huge fan of being on the other side of that conversation with. But if it's not broken, don't fix it. There's a reason that these things continually happen, and prospecting is no different. This is arguably one of the most difficult places in that sales process. You do not need a fancy marketing program. You do not need an external agency to go out and find new businesses, things like that. You can start with really simple tools. You maybe have a customer base already, put together a referral program, right? Referral programs, when they're put together properly, can be extremely effective at bringing new prospects into you. there's two important things to balance when you're building a referral program. That program needs to be attractive enough for someone to go out of their way, take time out of their workday, and potentially find someone, whether they know them, whether it's someone that they work with, and go through that process to actually refer them to you. But it also needs to be stringent enough that you're not just paying out referrals and not seeing the returns on that. So an important thing with a referral program, referrals shouldn't be paid out until a contract is out or until a contract is signed, right? They can't just refer their friends over, they all get a kickback, and then no one signs up and you end up spending money and not bringing in any new customers. It's an important thing when you're building that. Go ahead, Dennis. I'll take a quick break.
Oh, I didn't have anything, but I can add. Yeah, the real thing about all this is that you have to, with referral programs, like you said, Andrew, do not pay out until you've got the contracts in hand.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really even until the first invoice comes along and you've got them fully onboarded, because in the onboarding process, you may come across something that is a red flag that you need to stop the onboarding process with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So with a referral program, don't feel too generous, I think is probably the most important thing. Pay out for work that is done, but not for the promise of work to be done in the future is important. We all love technology, but I'm going to say it, go analog, take a walk. If your office is in a business park, if you are in a downtown core and you're in an office building, go for a walk, take a little bit of time. If you are dedicated to growing your business, the reality of this is that you're probably going to need to spend at least one full workday, so 8 hours within a month, just prospecting, right? Break it up over a few afternoons, get outside, get some fresh air, but go take a walk. If you find some of these businesses, business parks, or office buildings, they're all going to have a directory. Take a picture of that, bring them back on your phone. The general rule of thumb that I like to follow when you talk about prospecting and building a prospect list is once you think you've got a big enough prospect list, double it. Now that you've got your customer profiles, and you're going to start to go through these businesses and do a little bit of research on them, and you're going to be surprised at how many of these you're going to end up disqualifying, right? The important thing with sales is that it is, and you've heard the term sales funnel, I'm sure. And the reason for that is always shaped like a funnel. You want to put in a large number of leads at the top of that funnel because you're going to disqualify them. They're going to fall off in your process. Things aren't going to work out. So if you want to find a reasonable result from this, you need to start with a large number at the top, right? So as you're doing that, like I said, they're going to fall off of their own accord. As you start to prospect, you're going to disqualify a large number. So having that large enough list is critical to making sure that you're going to see the results that you want out the other end of this process, right? If you don't start with a large enough list, plain and simple, don't be surprised if you end up with 0 customers from your efforts, right? Sales, first and foremost, is a numbers game. You need to start with enough of a pipeline to be able to see new customers out the other end. Other really great way, and this is very simple, you can start this afternoon, Google your existing customers. If they're a great fit for you, oftentimes their local competition is going to be listed right below that. And you can take a quick scroll through Google and find probably 3 or 4 other businesses that are very similar, or at least work in that same vertical and are likely direct competitors to those businesses. You aren't signing a non-compete or anything like that. If your customers are a good fit, likely other businesses in that same vertical are also going to be a great fit, right? Now that you've got this list, though, you do need to do a little bit of research, right? And this is where you can start to combine that ideal customer profile with your knowledge of what makes someone a good fit for your business, right? So use things like their website, jump on LinkedIn, start to use things like Google News, right? When we want to look for things like, again, values, we want to see any kind of growth signals, stuff like that. They might have a press release or an announcement section in their website. You can take a look there. You can see, are they growing? Are they opening new businesses? Look at their career section. Are they hiring, right? Those sort of things are great signals that you can do in a matter of minutes for any of these businesses. Start to qualify these leads for yourself. So when you've got that all done, you're setting yourself up for the next stage. You've got your prospects, you're ready to go ahead. But as you get to that next stage, which is outreach, if you have too many companies that you've made to fit your customer profiles, you need to be a little bit ruthless in your disqualification process. And the reason for that is as you start to reach out, If you are reaching out to customers who are just not going to be a good fit, you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of cycles on something that's always going to be a losing situation, right? So build that list, be ruthless with disqualifying those prospects. But now that you've got your prospect list, businesses that would be a great fit for your business, they need your services. Now you need to start to go out and you need to prospect. So now we found our prospects. What's next? Now it's time to ask them to the dance. So how do we actually get in touch with these people? Well, again, maybe you want to try and do some targeted marketing, stuff like that. I know that we all are in the same boat, and I get it just as much as everyone else, and we all hate cold calls, but there is a reason that you get cold called so much, that I get called so much. I'm sure Dennis does as well. And the reason is that it works, right? You can warm things up. You can send out a quick intro email and things like that. And it's really effective that way, but don't expect a response to that, right? The idea with a warm-up email for someone, if you're sending out an email to that prospect, is not that they respond and that does all of your work for you. It's that when you call them, they recognize your name and they recognize your company name. It's not something that's completely out of the blue. You're more likely to be able to have a conversation with someone at that point. Now, a lot of these prospects, and this is just going to be the reality of it, have probably never heard of your business, and they likely have never heard the term MSP, or maybe don't even know what a managed service provider is. But it is safe to assume that if you know what that business does and they have a real problem and you know your services, that it is going to be a fix, right? So as you're going through that, again, remember things like businesses don't make purchases, people do, right? Depending on how comfortable you are having conversations. If you're an introvert, that's fine. You're going to be able to find some common ground that you can have a conversation with someone about, but it's making a connection with that prospect. So again, you might not love it, but I'm going to tell you this right now because it's a free app, whether you have an Android, whether you have an iPhone. It's the most default one that's overlooked these days, and it's called Phone. Pick up the phone, reach out to them. You don't necessarily have to speak with that owner of the business right away. You can maybe chat with the receptionist a little bit, find out what they're doing today. Someone who isn't in that decision-making capacity is likely going to have more time to have a conversation with you and help you uncover a little bit about that business's current state of affairs than someone who's extremely busy and is waiting to book meetings and their calendar's already full. And ultimately, what needs to happen is that you need to understand if they have a problem today and what that problem is. And having those quick conversations will give you a little bit of insight into what that business is currently doing. It has worked for more MSPs than I care to speak to, that if you pop into someone's office and you chat with the front receptionist, ask them how their computer works. Ask them how their IT services are working. The first person that's going to complain about it is going to be that person that's sitting at the front door. They're going to be happy to tell you about all the shortcomings, all the things that they can't do. Now that you know these sort of things, you can pick up the phone, or they're going to be a really good internal champion for you. If you're going out door to door, bring some leave behinds. Bring something that you can even just print off in your own office. That's a quick example of some of your services. If you've got really happy customers, some of those testimonials, things like that, just provide social proof. And again, social proof is a really important piece in this because people in general don't like being the first ones to do something. They don't like taking a lot of unnecessary risks. And when they see that someone else works with you and they're happy, it helps to alleviate that potential concern that maybe we're making the wrong decision. Maybe what we've been doing in the status quo that isn't great is still better than what we could potentially be doing in the nightmares we could potentially be getting into. So it is a really important thing that you go out, make sure that you've had those conversations. And ideally, that's where you start to understand things and you're working towards getting that first meeting with someone who is the decision maker. I've said it before, I will say it again. This is going to be the hardest part of any sales process. Finding someone, and again, out of the blue, making sure that you can connect with them and understand what their business is doing today and helping them understand what their business could be doing in the future if they were to be your partner is a very difficult thing. The reality of sales, you're going to have some doors slammed in your faces. You might have a lot of no's, but it's not about getting all of those no's. It's about getting to a couple of those people that have the yes, right? Having a predictable growth trajectory in your business, the most important thing that you can do is have a consistent number of meetings month in, month out. If you go, we aren't going to get into all the intricacies of cold outreach and stuff today because we could absolutely fill another hour with that. But the important thing with all of this is not that you're perfect at it, but that you're trying. You're out there doing the work. You're out there building the prospect list and you're reaching out. because I promise you, you're going to end up picking up the phone one day and you might have spent, 20 minutes calling businesses that you just get voicemails. And the next phone call that you take, you get the CEO of that other business on the line and his computer's not working. And sometimes it's just a matter of good timing, and they're happy to have that conversation because they've been dealing with problems all week. And now they're really, really open to having that conversation, understanding what they could be doing better. Right. So building that prospect list, getting someone started, big step in the process here. We're going to jump into the next piece, which is developing your sales pipeline. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, why do I need a sales pipeline? What's the purpose of this? I've got some people that I'm talking to. I track it maybe in a CRM, maybe you use your PSA. What's the purpose of this? Why do I need to know? Well, again, just like anything, and when you're building a process, it's important to understand not just what's working, but it's more important to understand what's not working, right? This is incredibly critical when you start to talk about sales. And the whole purpose of a sales pipeline, and this is a good example for anyone who wants to start somewhere, is that the different stages in that pipeline are not something that should be a gut feeling, right? You should be able to point to a physical kind of gate of sorts that a prospect has actually passed through, something that they've done. They've booked and completed a first meeting with you. Maybe they've done a discovery meeting where you get to walk around the office a little bit, see the infrastructure that they currently have, understand the scope of their needs, right? You've sent out a proposal, things like that, that are an actual sign of intent that someone is actually progressing through the process with you, and not just something where you can sit back and go, we had a great conversation, I'm sure they'll sign up. You have no real understanding of what their internal process is, but these steps are things that you can physically point to and say, not only did they take our first meeting, but they were happy to book another meeting with us, and they wanted to do a bit of a kind of walkthrough and a needs analysis so that we can start to maybe put together a proposal, right? The reason it's important to understand and track this is as you're building this process, the reality is this inverted triangle, this funnel shape is exactly how your pipeline's going to look. You're going to start with a whole lot of leads at the top. And as you work your way through, people are going to fall off, whether you've disqualified them or whether they've fallen off in the process for their own reasons. And why it's important to track that is you need to start to see, where are we losing most of our deals? If we sit there and we get into our first meeting and we really don't have a lot that are advancing to a second meeting or a needs analysis, maybe your value proposition isn't that strong. Maybe you're not truly understanding what the needs of their business are. If you're getting a lot of people into a state of proposal and you're not getting a lot of contracts signed, maybe you're pricing yourself out of the market, right? Maybe you're not understanding what their needs are properly so that you can actually develop an appropriate quote or anything like that. So understanding where leads are falling out of this process is probably more critical than understanding why they're moving through, because you're going to continue to iterate on this and you're going to continue to see if we are finding leads are not taking that second meeting. We want to go back and we want to maybe reevaluate what are some of the things that we're bringing to these meetings. Where are the places that we're understanding what their needs are today? And maybe we're just not doing a good job as communicating our value proposition and how we're going to see, their future state once they've gotten through this. And these are the tweaks that you can start to make so that as you're going through this process, you're continually improving and you're not finding yourselves losing deals at a certain stage, month in, month out, and you're not seeing that growth that you want, right? That is a really big piece. When you start to look at this, you can start to break it down, right? And again, as a quick example here, right? We've got someone who's in our awareness stage. This is someone who we've already prospected, right? We've already talked to them and now they're willing to take a meeting with us. So that first meeting is maybe scheduled, or you want to make that as a first meeting that's actually completed, that they're in this stage, right? Moving on to something like an interest stage, that initial meeting's taken place. Now we've been happy to set up a second meeting with them where we can do a bit more of a needs analysis, walk around the office, understand their current infrastructure, some of the softwares that they've got in place where we can start to put together our proposal. Once we've done that, if they're willing to have that conversation with you and go into that needs analysis, perfect. Let's move them into that intent stage. We understand what business, they're operating. We understand what services they need. Now we have everything that we need to actually formulate a proposal for them and get a quote out to someone. So this is your consideration stage. We've already got that formal proposal sent out to them, and let's start to negotiate some pricing. The reality is that first proposal that you send may not be a fit, right? You might someone who's set at this stage and you sit there and have to do a little bit of back and forth. You have to do a little bit of trimming on services that are offered, things like that, to start to have that back and forth, the mutual understanding of not only what services are going to be offered, but what value is going to be derived from those, right? How are we actually going to justify this cost once we've brought someone on board? And I'm going to say this, the last stage in every sales pipeline needs to be closed won, new customer is won. And the reason for it, anyone who's bought a new car and been to one of the dealerships and they've had to ring the gong and all that stuff, you can probably understand at this point, when we've gone through, we've built our proposal, our prospect list, we've vetted that out. We've reached out to people. We've gone through multiple meetings. This is not a quick process. There's a lot of work that can be involved with bringing in a new customer. It's important to celebrate that win, right? And having that deal move into your closed won section is extremely satisfying for anyone who's gone through this process. Potentially a month, 2 months, 3 months of back and forth with these customers. It's good to celebrate that little thing, right? So this is an example of your sales pipeline. And again, now you've basically set yourself up that you've got all of the infrastructure for a sales process in place. So what's your next step? Now that we've started to move some people through here, what do we need to start to take on next? And this is where it becomes extremely important, is you're going to measure, you're going to make some tweaks, you're going to make some adjustments, and you're going to continue to measure. You're never really done measuring what happens in your sales process. And this is the part that I love, where I say it's equal parts art, form, and science. This is the science of it. Numbers do not lie. You can have someone that is an absolute, you hire your salesperson, they're a silver tongue devil. They can chat with anyone, they can strike up a conversation, they're the life of the party, but they're not closing deals, right? So now you can start to dig into the metrics. You can start to understand, why is this person who I assumed they were great in an interview and I thought this was going to make my business absolutely explode? Well, why is this person not delivering the results that I want? And this is where the numbers come in. So what do you want to measure, right? First thing that you always need to measure is going to be your win rate. And this is a really simple one. How many deals are we starting with versus how many deals are we closing, right? This is something that's extremely easy to calculate out, but it's a good number to keep track of, because if you are the one that's proving out this process for yourself and you're starting to build it internally, you're going to have a good baseline and you're going to understand, maybe you're closing 20% of the deals that get in there. Maybe it's only 10, maybe it's 30%. Okay, we bring on a salesperson. Are they able to achieve those same results? Are they able to overachieve, right? What kind of expectations are we setting so that now maybe we want to scale that business? Maybe we're at a point now where we bring in another salesperson or a VP of sales. Can we start to see these metrics grow? Or are we at a point where we've capped out and this is a good number that's achievable for virtually anyone who fits this role? And this is what they need to be held to, because not all salespeople are created equal. Not all staff are created equal. We all understand that. Everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses, but understanding that if you are in a sales capacity, there's no hard feelings. It is a numbers game. If you can't bring in the number of deals that we expect you to, you're probably not going to be long for that role, right? Win rate is a really important part of that. When you want to break that down a little bit more, win rate by source is extremely important. Outbound sales is a difficult task, but it's a really important way to be able to predict the growth of your business. You're likely going to have other avenues that businesses come into your sales funnel, right? You're probably going to have some degree of a marketing lead out there. You're probably going to have people who just look for your services and stumble across you through Google, AdWords, stuff like that. Perfect. Now we know which avenue they've come into our business, which ones provide us with the highest win rates, right? And the best part about this is, now that we know where we're winning the most deals, we can start to refine that process to start to put a few more eggs in that basket, right? Are we spending a lot of time, energy, and money maybe on a space that doesn't bring in enough leads, right? Or the leads come in and they're just never crossing the finish line, right? Are we not maybe paying enough attention to other avenues where we're bringing leads in? Every business has limited resources to some degree or another, right? Whether it is your marketing budget, whether it is your time and energy, you name it. So you want to make sure that those resources are focused on your biggest chance of success. Win rate by source is going to give you this, right? You can understand, where do we need to focus our time and energy? That doesn't mean throw everything else out, but it does mean spend a little bit more time, focus a little bit higher on these things. If you've got a little bit of extra cash flow that you want to put towards a growth avenue, plug it into that space, because you know that likely out the other end, you're going to get better results. Right? Average length of your sales cycle. This is a really important one because when you start to look at it, we've got a process in place and we want to start to tune this. There's only so many different levers that you can pull in a sales process to get better results. Length of your sales cycle is an extremely important one. Is it taking you 6 months from contact to contract before you're signing someone? If that's the case, how do we shorten that cycle? How do we kind of expedite this process so that we're not spending half our year trying to build a new relationship? We can maybe take that down to 3 months. Maybe it's only a month, right? As you start to refine this process, this is probably one of the most critical pieces that you can start to influence that's going to accelerate your growth as a business, right? If you have a plan that you want to bring in 12 new customers at an average contract value of $1 million, that's probably a little bit aggressive, but maybe that's where we want to be. If that's what your goal is, how long is it going to take for each of those prospects to make it through your funnel? And if you know that, do you have the appropriate starting point of your sales funnel that you can expect those results? If you're looking at a 3-month average length of your sales cycle, and you look at your top of funnel, you look at how many prospects you're working with today, and you only have 5 of them in there, and you know that you close maybe 30%, but you want to get 5 new customers, the reality of that goal being achievable at that start of funnel is virtually nothing, right? You need to make sure that you're continually keeping an eye on the top of funnel and being able to predict out based on that length of sales cycle out the other end, how many customers are we going to gain from this? Annual contract value. I'm hoping this is something that everyone's tracking today, but it is really important because how much revenue is each of these customers bringing in? What is our average customer size? It also gives you a really good idea of if this new customer that you're speaking with is maybe a little bit outsized for you. If your average contract value is, $200,000 a year, $100,000 a year, and you get someone who you put together that proposal and it is $1 million, you need to look hard in the mirror and ask yourself, are you going to be able to appropriately service this customer, or are you going to burn a bridge, right? No one likes to play favorites, but the reality in a sales funnel is that you want to pay attention to some of those larger deals, because if you're putting in the same amount of work, I would like to have an outsized return versus, a bunch of smaller customers who come in and maybe they're a lot more work, right? Customer acquisition cost is another huge piece. You're going to spend money on this. There's no two ways about it. Whether it is just taking someone out for a coffee for a meeting, whether you've got a substantial marketing budget, whether you're outsourcing some of that marketing, you name it, what is it costing you to bring in each of these customers? And it's extremely important because, again, you need to know how long do we need this customer to stay on board before we're going to be profitable with them, right? Is there a significant difference in the actual channel cost of acquisition? Do we have a massive marketing budget that costs us a lot of money to bring in our one customer versus, that salesperson that we hired who's really great at prospecting and they're a quarter of the cost to bring in the same customer, right? All of these are really important. And again, how long do we need to retain these customers before we're overall profitable, right? The reality, if you've got a high enough cost of acquisition, you may be 2 or 3 months down the track before you've paid off what that cost was to bring that customer into your business, right? I'm going to take a moment, and I don't want to break anyone's heart, but there is a hard truth about sales. You are going to lose a lot more than you are going to win. And this is where if you start a sales career, everyone's going to tell you, you develop a thick skin, you do all these things. And you don't necessarily have to, but you have to understand once you've gone through this process, what is the reality of your close rate? And to put it all in perspective, for the vast majority of industries, a very successful close rate is going to be 30%. That's after you've prospected them, right? More than half of those deals, almost 2/3 or 3/4 of those deals, and those people that you're talking to are not going to sign up to be your customer. You're going to hear a lot more no's than you hear yeses, and that's absolutely okay. I said it early on, sales is a numbers game. If you are committed to growing your business and you are committed to the early parts of this, prospecting, filling that top of your sales funnel, you're going to see results. If you are not spending the time in some of the nitty-gritty, dirty areas of this, you're not going to see the results out the other end. And some of you may have already tried to build a process like this in place already. You may have gone through some of these steps, and you might not have cast a wide enough net. You might not have stayed at it long enough. It's no different than, Moneyball, if we want to give a pop culture reference. The numbers eventually prove out. right? But you need a large enough sample size to see that. So if we only have 4 or 5 customers that we're prospecting, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone if you don't see that growth out the other side of things, right? Really important tip for everyone is that a no today does not mean a no forever, right? And this is where having some degree of a CRM is going to save you hours of effort down the road. Whether you go out and spend the money on a Salesforce or a HubSpot or a purpose-built tool, a lot of us will have a PSA in place that will have some degree of functionality behind that. It doesn't make any difference what tool you are using as you start to build this process. What is important is that, yeah.
Andrew, I was going to say this is a great point, because I think what I heard was that on average, any businesses, there's only 25% of the businesses that are looking to make a move at any one time. And you've got to hit them when that is. But if you've had good interactions with them and you've continued to stay connected with them, when the time comes around for them to want to make a decision, they will obviously reach out to somebody who's treated them professionally.
Yep.
Over a series of time. And so I think, when you're out prospecting for today, you're out prospecting for tomorrow and next month and next quarter and next year and 2 years down the road. You just never know when they're going to have that bad experience. Would you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly. You may go through the whole process. They've got an internal IT person. It wasn't a great fit today. 3 months down the road, that person wants to go and travel the world for 2 years and they end up with no one in place. Well, now's a really good opportunity. If you just had great interactions with them, you're a really great fit for that person if that was the one reason that they weren't able to move forward with you. And having those pieces in place, understanding, and this is where I will say, make notes. If you've ever dealt with anyone in law enforcement, their most important tool is always their notepad. It is the exact same thing in sales. Understand as you've gone through and had those conversations, what pain points did they experience in their business today? What were the things that, weren't working, and where were some of the places that you knew and you could kind of have conversations with them about improvements to their business? Because like you said, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road, the one thing that's consistent with business is that nothing's consistent, right? As those changes happen, you don't want to start from scratch. If you've got good notes on those conversations and interactions that you had before, you're going to be able to go back to that CRM and know what happened before and have that quick conversation. Were these things that were true 6 months ago, are they still true today? What changed for you? Because, a year ago we had this conversation and we weren't a good fit. We weren't mutually, beneficial to each other. So what's changed for you now in the last 12 months? Why would we be a better fit today? And it is absolutely okay. As complicated as some of this may seem, and hopefully it doesn't seem all that complicated, but to boil it down to its most simple explanation is that sales is just a conversation, right? Everyone here has a business and has a service that they offer. Is that service beneficial to the entire world? Absolutely not, right? There is going to be a good portion of that business that is going to be a good fit for you, right? So now that we've gotten to that point, what made us a better fit today than we were before, right? If you have to walk away from that conversation, from that deal, unless there's a vast, vast difference in the values of your businesses, and it's just someone that is going to be that nightmare customer, there's a very good chance that you're going to be able to revisit that opportunity down the road. And whether it's yourselves as MSP owners, speaking to businesses out there who are looking for IT services, whether it is your vendors, important things to remember, it's always important to be respectful of other people's time, right? If you say, hey, do you mind if I touch base with you in 6 months and just see where things are at? Very few people are going to have a problem with that, provided you're not showing up at their door at 9 p.m. at night, right? If you can just send a quick email, touching base, seeing how things are going, you keep front of mind for those businesses, right? And like Dennis said, it's important to be front of mind at the right time in their business, because just as you have what's often referred to as your seller's journey, right? You're going through that whole process. Anyone on the other side of things has their buyer's journey, right? And if you're not meeting up at the same times there, someone's not interested, there's any roadblocks in their buyer's journey, then it's something that's likely going to be pushed off for a little bit of time, whether it is a month, a week, 6 months, a year, right? But it's important to make sure that you can revisit those and you're not just writing that off forever because they said no once. Okay. So I know we're getting close to time, so I want to make sure that we get to this point because I think that it's really important. You've done it. You've built your process. You've proven it out for yourself. You've gone through all the steps and you've been able to prove that you can go out, you can find customers, and you can bring on new contracts. So it's time that you want to grow things. You want to hire your first sales professional. How do we do that? This is a couple key things that anyone should keep in mind. I'm going to start with the compensation model because I think that it's something that unless you've built before is probably a vastly different process that you've ever gone through. A typical compensation model for a lot of salespeople is going to be about a 60-40 split, right? You always want to pay for performance with sales. So this is a good example. If you have a budget of $100,000 a year, we're making numbers easy here, $100,000 a year for a salesperson, and you want to have them hit a target of $1 million in annual contract value in that year, that means that they should be earning a $60,000 salary and their commission should be $40,000 when they hit that $1 million mark. I'm going to say never cap someone's commission, right? You immediately disincentivize them. Sometimes it may seem like, we're spending more than we think we should. But the reality is they're only earning that money if they're bringing money in for your business, right? So if that person goes out and hits $2 million, amazing, right? You've grown your business way more than you thought you ever were in that first year. And provided you can keep up with all of the servicing pieces of that, that person absolutely deserves to make a little bit more money. This is a question that I get a lot of times. And candidly, I've struggled through myself when I was early on in my career of hiring sales professionals is how do I know who to hire, right? Again, you might find that person, you get a good interview, and they absolutely have the gift of the gab, right? Is that someone who's going to be a good fit for your business? Couple things to remember here. If you look at someone's resume and they have all of these incredible metrics of all of this performance that they've blown their numbers out of the water for the last 10 years, the reality is if it seems too good to be true on their resume, it absolutely is. There is virtually no way for you to verify past performance from someone else's sales role, even if they're a publicly traded company. You're not going to be able to call up their past, manager, direct report and say, how are their performances in January of 2022? It's just not going to happen. So my recommendation for everyone, hire someone that you like and that you would buy from personally. If you like that person, you enjoy how they interact with your customer, that's probably the most important thing, right? There's a lot of this stuff that can be taught and can be refined, whether it is how they move someone through the process, how those meetings are conducted, all of that sort of thing. But this person is probably the most public representation of your company before someone becomes a customer of yours. If you don't like how they interact with you in that interview process and you don't necessarily find them to be respectful, for them to be honest and all of those sort of things, then they're not going to be a good fit for your business. And I will say this time and time again, honesty will win 100% of the time in both sales, but in hiring that salesperson as well, right? You don't want to go out and hire someone who is your very first salesperson and tell them, oh yeah, we've had this, great process in place. We've had multiple salespeople, be honest with them, right? I've gone through and I've done this myself and I've been able to prove out these results. It's really difficult for someone to come into a role, and anyone who's been in sales their lives and they've gone out and they've had interviews has shown up to an office for a sales interview and they say, oh, everyone here makes $200,000 and they're all incredibly successful. And you go out to the parking lot and everyone's driving a 94 Accord. I can tell you right now that that person is lying to you, and you're probably not going to walk into that role and achieve what they're telling you they're going to achieve. So be honest with them about the hiring process as well. People will appreciate that. And I hope one of the things that everyone's been able to take away from this is that there are no tricks to sales. Everyone might think, oh, this person's going to pull this thing, or they might be able to pull this out. The reality of sales is it is just a lot of hard work, and it is a lot of grinding to get through all of those no's, all of those prospects, all of those meetings to get to the ultimate end goal, which is bringing on that new customer. If you are offering a legitimate solution to a legitimate problem and it is not snake oil, and the reality of the managed services space is that that is not what any of us offer, you're going to have an easy time. You're going to be able to have those conversations, right? But there are no tricks to this. And anything short of being honest with that is going to result in nothing more than angry customers and angry salespeople when you claw back their commissions for a contract that they signed that left the next month, right? So that is the base of it. I want to take a little bit of time, thank everyone. If you want to connect with me, by all means, reach me at Gradient here. Give us a shout. Reach out to, meetgradient.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn. We do have a little bit of time, so if there were any questions, I'd love to take a little bit of time and field those.
Andrew, one of the things I always like to make a comment about when you go to hire a new salesperson is after you review what their salary request is and their commission request, you have to translate that into how many new clients you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Once you understand how many new clients you're going to get, you have to then have the reality check of, can I handle that? So to be successful, if you were going to hire me, and for me to be successful and meet my needs, maybe I need to sell and close 3 deals a month. And you look at it and you said, I've never closed more than 1 in a month. Right?
Yep.
Am I doing the right thing at the right time? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Should I be hiring me at all? Or do I need to hire somebody that's maybe a little bit junior that will do that? Because the last thing you want to do is bring me in and have me be wildly successful, and now you have a bunch of unhappy new clients, right? Or old
Yep.
clients because you can't manage them. So I was wondering what your thoughts are there.
I, again, couldn't agree more. If you bring in someone who absolutely blows it out of the water and they are bringing on triple what you did before, can you service that? If you can't onboard those customers, you can't support those customers in the same way that you were able to support someone pre that salesperson, people are going to leave. You're going to end up with angry customers, canceled contracts, and as soon as those contracts cancel, I didn't mention it, but build something into your compensation agreement where it's not set in stone. They don't stay for that period where you're paying your customer acquisition cost off. That commission is likely something that should be clawed back. But if you have someone who's that successful and you can't deliver on what they're selling, I can tell you right now, they're not going to stay with you for very long, right? They're going to go find a company that can service what they're selling. So yeah, you need to make sure that you are scaled up appropriately. And, it's a great problem to have. And hopefully if you're established enough that you've got that person that you've brought in that is now really taking things to the next level, maybe you are able to scale that up from the technician and the deliverables section, within that same time frame. But like you said, if you've got someone who is, a little bit more junior and they're going to grow with you in that process, there's nothing wrong with taking someone who doesn't have 20, 30 years of experience and helping them gain that experience and helping them grow your business, because likely you two are going to be at the same level and you're going to be able to scale up and grow together.
Yeah, and another comment I'd like you to address maybe is, as a owner-led sales, I go out and all my processes are between my ears.
Mm-hmm.
When I hire somebody, I need to have done some documentation. So how do you want to coach these people that are on here on what they should be doing to get ready to hire a new salesperson?
Yeah. So if you've built your process and you followed some of these steps, some of building this requires documentation, building a sales pipeline and things like that. You're going to have to document some of that. But likely the most important thing that you can do is not hire them, give them a week of training on, the services you sell and then walk away. Spend some time working hand in hand. Let them shadow you. Go out on a number of meetings together, right? It is fantastic for someone who's new in a role to be able to ride shotgun with someone who's been doing it for years. So if you can take them out and show them a little bit of the ropes, that's a great way to do it. But as you start to do this as well, write some stuff down. There doesn't have to be a fancy way that you document it. If you've got a Word document in, OneDrive, start to write down your best practices for prospecting. What do you normally do? Where do you find success? As I'm going through and I'm moving someone through the sales process, probably the most important thing that you can document, if you had to have something kind of hard-coded, so to speak, would be what are the steps that take someone through the different stages of your sales pipeline, right? You want to make sure that that's as accurate as possible, because once you let them go and you're setting them off to do it on their own, I need to be able to take a look at the 10,000 foot level and see our sales pipeline so I can see if we're performing at the level that I want. But if those kind of processes aren't followed, then it just becomes a mess. There's nothing that's predictable within that. And you're really going to struggle with understanding, where are we at in the process with a lot of these customers.
Well, it's been an awesome discussion. I know we're running over. Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to jump back in and wrap us up. That would be great.
Yeah, so we'll follow up everybody with the recording, and reach out to Andrew if you have any questions or interested in the grading MSP product. I'm looking forward to engaging with you, Andrew, and Big Big.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I'll see everyone down in Florida.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.